Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and did you know they just announced an Elden Ring movie is in the works, coming to us from A24. The studio that figuratively made a Dark Souls movie is now literally making an Elden Ring movie. That's interesting. In the past, video game adaptations have not exactly fared well, I think it is safe to say. Going back to the Mario movie from the 90s, to the Halo show from recent years. Of course, sometimes they fare a little better. The Sonic movies have been quite well received, for example. But Elden Ring, well, we don't know much at the moment other than director and studio. Alex Garland, director of Civil War, Warfare, and so on, and A24, the studio that's produced, well, lots of stuff, but most notably, for me, The Green Knight. Elden Ring is a hard video game to adapt. Actually, I suppose you could just say Elden Ring is a hard video game, and that's kind of the general consensus there, isn't it? But in this video, I'm going to take a stab at various attempts they might go with, and I invite you to share your thoughts down below in the comments too. First up, they could try and adapt Elden Ring, the video game, one-to-one to the screen. You know, that's to say, the Tarnished goes on his adventure across the lands between. And this approach seems unfeasible to me. Even if we stick to the main game path, the experience, it won't have natural rises and falls, and it will feel disjointed because he'll be like, I have to go here and get the thing. Now I have to go here and get the thing. Now I have to go over there and, guess what? Get the thing. A lot of the main areas aren't saturated in plot. That's just how FromSoft games usually are. A lot of the plot, the dialogue and all that, it comes from NPCs, and a lot of the times the NPCs aren't directly tied to the main quest. And purely going by time, there isn't nearly enough to fit that into even a 3-hour movie if you're adapting everything. Unless you have like super truncated versions of everything with like a lot of shots of just the Tarnished walking across the landscape, you know? But there's plenty of other routes they could take. The worst would be making something inspired by Elden Ring. Jack Black is John Tarnished, you know? But they take some imagery and some themes, but really have nothing to do with it. And it would be like, oh, the Elden Ring is like a physical, actual ring that John Tarnished needs to put on his finger. Examples of this kind of storytelling, or adaptations, would be the Halo TV show, or the old Mario movie. Another route they could go with is a prequel. You have a lot of stuff to work with there, Marika, Godfrey's Crusade, the war against the giants, Mesmer's Crusade, the Shattering itself. Honestly, there's enough there that you could make a trilogy of movies, honestly, or a few seasons of TV. Another example of what they could do for an adaptation would be part of the story, a chunk of it that gives you the Elden Ring experience in a nutshell. A slice of the game that has a lot of story, action, and so on. Whilst it might not make that much sense out of context, and if you haven't really played the games, you could make a movie, for example, out of Miquella's Halig Tree, involving everything that goes on there. Lieutenant and the Albinaurics who are trying to get there, Millicent's journey there and how that resolves, and of course everything with Miquella and Melania. So can you imagine, if you haven't played Elden Ring and you go into the Elden Ring movie and they're like, oh hey, it's Miquella, Marika, Millicent, and so on, like all these names that sound quite similar. Speaking of Millicent though, you could make a movie about the NPCs, or one NPC in particular. For example, you could make a movie out of one NPC who has, a bit of an arc to them, like Nefeli Lu or Millicent and so on. Because the Tarnished, well, it seems wrong to make the Tarnished a character, because you run into the issue of endings and builds. Every player has a different ending and different build. Now you can make the Tarnished a non-character. Some movies have done that in the past. They have like a protagonist who doesn't really have much of a personality, they're just sort of there. And so it would be weird to make the Tarnished really fleshed out and, oh, these are my motivations and stuff, because you don't really need that. Tarnished is a player character, so it's a deeply personal character. It's not even like with, say, Mass Effect, where you could, in theory, make Shepard a character, because, Shepard is Shepard. Tarnished is too personal for every player, I think. Speaking of which, who do you even cast? Is live action really the right choice? Frankly, I would say no. Animation of some sort is much better here, I think, because the world of Elden Ring is extremely fantastical. Getting that to work in live action would need an intense budget. Sure, you can find some cool landscapes, but every single exterior shot is going to need CGI sky for starters. Elden Ring's world has a very fantastical sky, and that sky plays a big part of the aesthetic. Animation, whether a cartoon or, like full CGI, would be smarter, if you ask me, because it's easier to sell that sort of world. But it looks like they're going with live action, which also makes me think a lot of it will be sort of inside castles where they can just film in existing locations, or even if not, CGIing, like green screening a castle background is a lot cheaper. But in general, it could be just a CGI hellscape, and if 90% of your movie is CGI anyway, why not just go the whole way and make it easier to blend that? Same issue that the Warcraft movie had. The orcs looked pretty good, but when you had the orcs and the humans interacting, it didn't look good. But for actors, I have no idea, but it would be insanely distracting to have the Tarnished pop up and be like, haha, it's me, Timothy Chalamet, you have Tom Cruise pop up, talking about may chaos take the world and stuff. So I reckon you need very small, relatively unknown actors. I mentioned at the start of this video how A24 figuratively made a Dark Souls movie, right? Well, if you're wondering what I meant by that, Green Knight is that. I have a full video on that movie, my sort of review thoughts of it. It's one of my favourite movies of recent times, and it is also, honestly, I believe the closest we have and probably need to like a Dark Souls movie. Not that the plot is anything like Dark Souls, but just the tone and the way it's all shot and presented. It's a good approach to take to a Dark Souls movie. Please do go check it out if you haven't seen it. And well, let me know what you think about this Elden Ring movie. I'm skeptical, I think. It can work, but the odds are stacked against them unless they play their cards just right. Well, let's see how it turns out, right? I'm not going to just assume it's going to be garbage, so I will wait and see, but I am skeptical. If I were doing it, well, I'd go with the animated route. Probably 2D, but full CGI, like the sort of intro movies, works as well. I just don't think live action can really convey the world right. And you might think, oh, well, a lot of people are just humans in Elden Ring, but again, FromSoft often really exaggerate the human form. Oh, look at just about anyone. Like, you could argue that, in a way, Radahn and Melania are both humans, but how are you going to cast someone as Melania? Like, her proportions are nuts. Radahn is, like, 20 feet wide, and it would just look weird to just have, like, a dude in Radahn's armor. It's just easier to accept something's in animated form. Your brain is easier to fall into immersion that way. But I would probably go with Marika's backstory, leading up to then Godfrey's Crusades. Whole structure, though, I mean, that would turn this video into like a 2-hour long thing, talking about everything that you need, where you cut, where you give details, where you don't, because again, Elden Ring's story a lot of the time is quite vague, so how specific do you want to be? How much exposition dumping do you want? So I'll not go into all that, but yes, once again, let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.